I have two more honorees to seize this moment of the program. I have a Bob and Bob warm-up story. Back in '97, Bob and Bob planned a golf trip by visiting Don Weiss at his home in Florida. Don picks up the story from here. So, spring comes, and the trip of the two Bobs begins in Philly, with them planning on meeting at the office and then driving to the airport. Halfway there, Bob Morton asked Bob Schenck, "You haven't forgotten anything, have you? Got your ticket and everything, right?" Bob says, "Yep." As it turned out, that wasn't the case. As they're pulling into the airport, it seems our guy Bobby discovers that he had indeed left his plane tickets on the desk back at the office. This is Don Weiss's quote. Surprise! So Bob Martone swings through the airport and rockets back to the office at breakneck speed. After running in and picking up his tickets, lying on the desk where he had left them, frickin' frack bolt back to the Philly airport, hoping not to miss their flight. Somehow, they make the flight and arrive in Tampa, looking forward to playing a little spring golf and visiting their old pal Don. You see, the plan was, since the trunk of my car stays packed with books and other FAD paraphernalia year-round until the summer break, they were going to simply rent a car when they arrive and drive to my place, saving time. It's at this point where the weekend begins to go downhill. As I was waiting around for the boys to arrive, the phone rings. It's the world-famous editor, Bob Martone. "Don, I've got some good news and bad news. The good news is we're here. The bad news is you have to come pick us up. It seems both of our driver's licenses have expired." And then roll around as a So, bad back and all, I unload the trunk to make room for all their stuff and make a 50-minute trip over to the Tampa airport. Of course, I bitched and moaned to them all the way back to Lakeland about how they both could have unbelievably allowed their driver's licenses to expire. Yep, Bob and Bobby, 2 peas in a pod. Having changed our tee times, we're still running late. We headed directly to the golf course. With the first part of their trip painfully over, off we go to play golf. Bob and Bob in one cart, I in another. The weather was perfect, and through 8 holes, we were having a great time. As I stepped up to the night tee box, I was 2 under and feeling pretty good about my round so far. I then promptly nailed my tee shot right down the middle, where I'd been all day. Bob and Bob also hit good drives as well, and we were all in the fairway, sitting pretty for our next shots into the green. I drove ahead to check my ball for the distance to the pin, and knowing Bob Schenck was behind me, I headed back to park and sit off to the right side to watch his second shot, surely thinking I was safe. Well, the golf cart facing Bob, I sat there with my right arm casually resting on the back of the passenger seat and my left hand on the steering wheel. As Bob was lining up for his shot, I thought to myself, I'm safe here, right? Then again, this was Bob Schenck, and anything is possible with a golf cart in his hands. Whoops, too late. Bob's second shot suddenly turned into Skenk's greatest shank. As I watched in horror, Bob Schenck was now rocketing toward me at light speed. I did the only thing I could do to save myself. Since I was already leaning to the right of the cart, I made the decision to hurl myself out the right side. How my knees didn't hit the steering wheel on the way out, I'll never know. With my feet never touching the floorboard of the cart, I flung myself into a drop and roll position and hoped for the best. The best did not happen. I landed on my left shoulder, hitting the turf with a resounding crunch. As I completed my dive, rolling over onto my back, now staring up at the sky, I realized it wasn't Bob and Bob who had come to visit. It was actually Freddy Krueger and Jason. And they were trying to kill me. The two Bobs now rushed over in their cart frantically, jumping out to see how I was. As Bob Schenck, Freddy Krueger, kept apologizing over and over, Bob Martone blurted out, "That's the most incredible thing I've ever seen." I can't believe you were able to get out of the way so fast. It's a good thing, too, because there's a big ball mark, dimples and all, in the seat right behind where your chest would have been. Way to go, Bob. You almost killed Doc. And the thing, I took a rare day off for this kind of abuse. Needless to say, the Bob and Bob Show never asked to come back after that. And thank you, Don, for your towel-worthy version of a classic time-setting story. Now to honoree number 2. I'd like to welcome Bob Schenck back to the fold, if only for the day. His reappearance only disappoints those who may have bet heavily that he wouldn't show up until tomorrow. But here he is, so time to pay up. Bob's retirement coincides with his 20th anniversary at FA Davis, which he reached on August 14th, without a day to spare. For those of you that might have figured Bob can't locate a clock, at least he knew where to find the calendar. When Bob arrived in 1994, he worked quickly to provide Davis with 2 major breakthroughs. The antiquated budgetary process had been a unilateral exercise performed by the finance department. Bob revolutionized the process, activating each department to create and monitor their annual budgets with full ownership. This enabled the company to update the status of the cost side as we approached the final quarter, and was instrumental in helping us manage the unwanted downturns. FA Davis, meet the 20th century, it's 1994. Bob also ushered in the company's first 401k plan that has provided employees with a wide assortment of investment options and escalating matches. The 401k fund has exceeded $20 million and should continue to grow if so many people would just stop retiring. Bob's biggest contribution in 20 years may have been his rush to defend FA Davis during the Logan bankruptcy proceedings in 2000. Bob put in an extraordinary amount of additional time to make sure FA Davis could salvage the best possible outcome. Countless strategy sessions were called with our Chicago attorney, and eventually Bob recruited a gunslinger accountant from New York that he had known before Davis. Eventually, Davis recovered 80 cents on a dollar during a year where we suffered from a serious sales shortfall. Disaster was averted because Bob demonstrated a resolve and a sense of urgency in a time of crisis that added credibility to his position and facilitated the timing of his promotion to vice president. Bob has also been a very willing and active participant in strategizing for our 2 legal battles with Lippincott and then with the Tabors estate. We won our case with Lippincott despite RN Notes having no copyright registration, and we settled with the estate, which eventually removes them from royalty compensation. Bob's commitment to Davis's best interest was exemplary in every major external disturbance. His diligence did not go unnoticed by federal Judge Mitchell Goldberg, who presided over the Tabors case. Near the end, the judge addressed both parties in his courtroom, off the record, and insisted that no one take notes. While he was explaining to the FADBobschenck side the high risk and expecting a reversal by the circuit court, suddenly the judge shouted, "Mr. Craven, I said no note-taking." I looked at Bob, who quickly lifted his pencil from a pad and stopped taking notes. But it wasn't the best time to correct the judge, and so we didn't. Not sure if this is a related story, but shortly thereafter, Arlene, who every so often needs my signature on a check, when Bill or Bob are out, made an appearance at my door. She stood looking at her documents and then started to laugh. "Oh, you need to give Bob a vacation." She stepped forward to hand me the check. He had signed my name, which was surprisingly legible, and left me with a blank line. When she stopped laughing, Arlene said, "You may as well sign his name, Ron, so maybe we can spare him any embarrassment." Which we did, of course, until now. The judge was a menacing figure, but that was just Bob being Bob. And I want to thank all of you that have kindly and thoughtfully accepted my invitation to share with me your favorite Bob stories. There is no shortage. Before I hired Bob, I completed my due diligence by calling his references. When I reached his former boss at Van Nostrand, Judith Joseph, she boasted about his sincerity, his diligence, his competence, and then she said, "But he's a little bit forgetful." 20 years later, I'm left seeking a sorting process for Bob's legend and lore. Please bear with me as I attempt to put Bob's legacy in a Jeopardy format with the following Jeopardy categories. They are logistics, lost and found, phone and electronics, power of observation, and voice level. Let's start with phone and electronics for 50. The first answer is, I was just playing with my phone. And the question, what did Bob sheepishly confess after all his incoming calls were mysteriously forwarded to Cynthia Dawden? Lost and found for 50. The answer? The conductor's lunch. And the question, what did Bob's macaroni salad become when Bob was supposed to deliver it to the summer solstice party? Bob had the first and only dish contribution to receive a food award for a food no one ever tasted, at least who was at the party. How about power of observation for 50? The answer is, who is Sharon Lee? And the question is, what did our guest from Morgan Stanley say when Bob handed him what he thought was his business card? Apparently Bob had quite a collection of business cards that got redistributed. Lost and found for 100. The answer? On top of his car. And the question is, where did Bob leave his phone when it was spotted during an MIS smoking break? Which begs another question. Do we love Bob because he's a little forgetful? Or do we love Bob more because he had no idea his phone was missing and Moody brought it in? phone electronics for 100. The answer is 6. And the question is, what was Penn State's losing streak when Bob left an elongated voicemail imploring me to come down and inspect Dan McQuiston's trousers, which were, and I quote, carpenter pants that looked like they came right out of the hamper. Do we have a dress code here? Looks like you struggle to put anything on. Fortunately, Penn State won the next game, and apparently all was forgiven. Voice level / electronics combo for 200. And the answer, to remind Bob again, had to add a smiley face. And the question is, what was so important that Bob, from his desk, suddenly yells,
Kim, I need your help right away.
Logistics for 50. The answer is full price. The question, after a late Phillies game, what did Bob pay to stay overnight at the Embassy Suites? After a perfect stranger rudely failed to wake Bob up in time for the last train out of town. Evidently, Embassy Suites didn't wake Bob up either, since Bob should have known F.A. Davis has had a standing discount there for maybe 20 years. Powers of observation for 50. The answer is about 4 years. Question is, how long did it take Bob to notice that Neil had been dyeing his hair? Told at McFadden's at the ballpark, Bob had the daring to challenge the assertion and then promised to get the editorial board early the next morning to have Judy verify before we got to her. What happened? Oh no. Bob was the last to arrive at the meeting. But in time to hear Neil's very public confession, which was punctuated by Judy's, Bob, you're right there with the uptake. Logistics for 100. The answer, the 2006 Masters, the 2007 U.S. Open, and a well-planned vacation. And the question is, can you name 3 things that canceled Bob out of meeting week at the very last minute? Power of observation for 100. The answer is, please repair your divots. And the question, what did the sticky note say on the wall in Bob's office upon his arrival the next day after Bob scooped a nice chunk of sheetrock while fine-tuning his overlap grip? The sticky note's author, Terry Delorphus. Lost and found for 200. The answer, the restroom at the dentist office. And the question is, what did Bob tell Lori when he pulled out a key with a long handle from his pocket? She said, where did you get that? And the final Jeopardy is voice level for 100. And the answer, on vacation. And the question is, where was Arlene when Bob, from his distant corner office and from the depths of his lungs, yelled,
Arlene!
How was your vacation, by the way?
It was fine.
Bob, thank you for being a good sport. I'm sure you can feel the love in the air. All kidding aside, I want to thank Bob for helping carry the F.A. Davis Company through a critical generation. He made great progress in human resources. He managed our relationship with the bank to offer continued support even in times of financial stress. He was a major voice in our installation and implementation of Clobitech and its subsequent iterations. And he even survived probably his biggest personal crisis. That is the day Kim announced she was leaving for a .com startup named Pet Foods Direct. 8 months later, she was back, and nobody was happier that NASDAQ had crashed than Bob. Bob was always true to two things: his valued opinion and the best course for F.A. Davis, and for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you, Bob, and may your retirement be a very pleasant, indelible memory. I have for you your silver box, a wonderful photo album of your Davis career put together by Laurie and George. And I also want to give you a last crack at our lost and found. Maybe, just maybe, there might be something of yours you left behind.